Since the first time you crawled, you were familiar with the fall. The plunge you take to the ground, the fall you take doesn't get old. Because each time over the course of your life you trip up, each time, though each fall provides insight. From conception you had this innate obsession with fear. Scared. We all have it in us too. Because when the fall is near, you sometimes don't want to face the ledge. When are you going to let go and fall? The fall means you face the darkness. The fall means your belly gets twisted and you think you will miss all the things that really don't matter because the ledge is up there and soon the ground will be a whole new adventure. The ledge is behind you. The fall brought out a new you. The fall taught you something new. Just like you learned to walk from a crawl, you will find the fire inside of you. The fall is cold. The fall is windy and wet. Hurricanes with constant rains force destruction and pain. But what happens after the hurricanes fade? People come together and build anew. The fall forced a shedding of old to bring a new foundation reflective of you. Let the leaves that fell remain on the ground where you saw them and keep walking and falling through seasons with knowledge. The leaves that fell nourished the ground around them. The notion of motion is seasons and deeper meaning. The spring forced the fire that made you fall into winter. The winter made you spring. Did you spring or did you leap? Didn't you crawl once? There are secrets that you keep. Unlock your past and commune with your kinfolk. The spirits are around you when the veil is thin. Within lies the light you need to shed question into the void to bring knowledge and compassion and understanding to breathe rebirth into the air around you. Feel the purpose of transition. Feel the turn of eras. The natural cycle, the speed, the fall, the dark, the rebirth. Fall is death. Fall is birth. Fall is then life. And life is earth. Seasons, change, growth, life. Fall is life.
Time for tea. Tune in.
Significant elections that we are having. Why is it where there are billions of dollars in this election and you're seeing those pro-democracy groups do not have the resources that are needed and are being creative, trying to pool resources, because what we see is there's a consulting class that is primarily white men in DC, in the Beltway, that literally are being the consultants, political consultants on these political campaigns, and they're advising candidates to put all of their money in television. And that supports these white media conglomerates, right? Which is extremely problematic for a number of reasons. Number one reason is young voters and many communities of color, but particularly young voters, are not watching television, the traditional television outlets. We're looking at programs that are more progressive. We're looking at programs like Democracy Now! We're looking at Netflix and YouTube and getting news from different sources. That's one. Secondly, this is not an air war. This is a ground war. Polls don't win elections. People do. And so if we are to really take serious this election, we have to literally go where people are mobilizing voters. They're encouraging and inspiring voters to get to the polls. Those are community organizations and groups that are doing civic engagement work that have their pulse on the people that's going to move folks. And the third thing is we have to really think about kind of messaging. That oftentimes what we see in the messaging, when you look at television and you look at the political ads, there are one or two issues oftentimes that have been decided by some national poll or national consultants that may or may not speak to the issues that people care about in the communities that we're talking to. Those voters who have not been moved to vote or participate so far in the election, they've heard all of the sound bites. That's not moving them. They need another message. And in order to do that, you may have to make sure you have the right messengers that are literally putting that out, putting a different kind of narrative to really be able to speak to folks and let them make the connection of why this election is critical to them. They may not care about the issues that are the top issues on the national platform, or it may be in a different kind of priority. But those are the reasons why we really, it's bad habits are hard to break. What we're saying is what happened in Georgia was not a fluke. That is the future of politics in America, to literally recognize that it is going to be community-led efforts, grassroots democracy groups that are literally our best defense on the front lines for protecting us from fascism.
And your this latest fact that President Biden's authorizing the Democratic National Committee to transfer $10 billion to House and Senate Democratic campaign committees and helping to pledge to raise $8 million for party candidates. The DNC now has transferred a total of $27 million so far this cycle, a record-breaking amount of money. Where you see that money going and what you want to tell the Democrats to do with it?
I see that money going primarily on TV. We're seeing that money, we're bombarded. You can't turn on a television and every single ad is over and over and over again. And while, yes, that may have some impact, what I do know is those voters who have been disengaged in the process, those voters who are already suspect around participating, those voters who have not been moved so far, in order for those voters to be moved, that's like hand-to-hand communication. That has to be peer-to-peer organizing. So what I would like to see, and what we were attempted to do in this op-ed, is to put it out, to lay it out, that there is a winning strategy. We have receipts. We can actually show that we're able to win when you're building out and you're supporting the ecosystem of support of pro-democracy groups, that is a game changer. We saw that in Alabama in 2017. We saw that in Georgia in 2020 and 2021. And so why are we abandoning a strategy that we know works and going back a strategy that has gotten us here in the first place?
What about this record turnout that we're seeing in Georgia? I mean, you have this highly contentious senatorial race, Reverend Raphael Warnock versus Herschel Walker. Very close. Raphael Warnock, according to the polls, slightly ahead, who's already served 2 years in office. And then you have Kemp versus Stacey Abrams, a colleague of yours, one of the leading voting rights activists in this country, but she is further behind Kemp, who you talk about as quashing votes, removing people from the voting rolls. That's Kemp.
What the Republicans have done, which I think is despicable. One of the things that they have done is they've actually used messages to actually exploit the pain and discontent of Black voters. What we're seeing is even with Herschel Walker, they don't care about Herschel Walker for the most part, where Herschel Walker is a placeholder for them. Certainly, here's a man that we're actually seeing have a meltdown daily in terms of literally putting it out where he has major character issues. That we know that he has major issues around balance with women, balance in his family. There's major issues that he has, and we know that if you listen to him, you can actually hear that there's some cognitive things going on with him as well. And so while this is not to make an excuse for him, because he's certainly a grown man and should be accountable to his actions and putting himself out there, the bottom line is he is being used. He's being manipulated and used in this moment. And because they have decided that all they needed to do is we've got to try to peel off the Black voters to find a Black face that can actually support and stand for a white agenda that would actually divide the vote in Georgia. We have seen in a recent month, which was very disheartening to me, this whole notion that Brian Kemp is now saying that, there's this message that Brian Kemp says that he is good on businesses, on small businesses. Well, and he will be good for Black businesses. Well, how so? He's been in office for 4 years. And what we know is of the millions of dollars of contracts that the state of Georgia gives out, Black voters, Black people who make more than 28%, almost 30% of the population of Georgia have received less than 1% of the business contracts for the state of Georgia. Here's a person that says, Brian Kemp is saying that, yes, he cares about the people of Georgia and he is good for Georgia. Well, how so? Since he has been in office, 6 hospitals have closed, and we're on the verge of another hospital closing in Metro Atlanta. All of that is, yes, can we place that in his lap? Absolutely, because he has refused to expand Medicaid, which is part of the reason why even the latest hospital said that it is closing, because it cannot handle the weight of so many uninsured patients that are coming in. And so if he expanded Medicaid, will actually bring in more than $1 billion in our state, that we could have saved those hospitals. We could save this hospital that is on the verge of closing. But he doesn't care about that, because he doesn't care about the people of Georgia. What he cares about is his own power.
Clear this is a full-scale invasion.
Rubber bullets, helicopters, armored vehicles.
John Fetterman and Republican Mehmet. The November 8th election to fill the seat held by Republican Senator Pat Toomey, who's retiring at the end of the term. The Pennsylvania race will likely help decide which party controls the Senate. Fetterman's the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, who's running as a progressive populist. Oz is a well-known television doctor who's worth at least $76 million. He's been endorsed by Donald Trump. Much of the race has been focused on Fetterman's health. Just days before the Democratic primary in May, Fetterman suffered a stroke, forcing him to cancel public appearances for months. He still suffers from auditory processing issues. On Tuesday night, a closed captioning system was set up so Fetterman could read the questions and his opponent's responses. During his opening statement, Fetterman discussed his stroke.
And let's also talk about the elephant in the room. I had a stroke. He's never let me forget that. And I might miss some words during this debate, mush 2 words together, but it knocked me down, but I'm going to keep coming back up. And this campaign is all about, to me, is about fighting for everyone in Pennsylvania that ever got knocked down, that needs to get back up, and fighting for all forgotten communities all across Pennsylvania.
One of the most heated portions of the debate between John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz centered on the issue of reproductive rights. This is Dr. Oz talking about his support for the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
there should not be involvement from the federal government in how states decide their abortion decisions. As a physician, I've been in the room when there's some difficult conversations happening. I don't want the federal government involved with that at all. I want women, doctors, local political leaders, letting the democracy that's always allowed our nation to thrive, to put the best ideas forward so states can decide for themselves.
Meanwhile, John Fetterman reiterated his support for reproductive rights.
What I support on Roe v. Wade. That was the law of the land for 50 years. He celebrated when it fell down, and I would fight to reestablish on Roe v. Wade. That's what I run on. That's what I believe. And I've always believed that the choice belongs women and their doctors. And he believes that the choice should be with him or Republican legislators all across this nation.
For more, we're joined in Philadelphia by Will Bunch, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, national columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Will, welcome back to Democracy Now! So let's start off the significance of this race. I mean, it's one of the most watched races in the country right now. Could determine the balance of the U.S. Senate, and then talk about this debate last night.
Yes, well, it absolutely could. I mean, if you look at the polls, right now, if all the races went the way the polls are predicting, we'd be at or close to another 50-50 Senate. So one race could really decide whether it's 50-50 or 51-49. Either way, it could decide, who the next Senate Majority Leader is going to be, whether it's going to be Mitch McConnell or Chuck Schumer. So this race is absolutely important. The polls have shown it's been tightening, that Fetterman's led in most of the polls, but Oz has polled to within a virtual tie at this point. So last night was truly, in terms of Senate races, and I've been covering politics for 40 years, just one of the most make or break nights I've seen in my lifetime of covering politics.
And talk about what happened last night. In the beginning, when John Fetterman addressed the issue of his stroke, very unusual as he read closed captioning so he could process the questions and Mehmet Oz's responses.
Yes, I mean, so what Fetterman and his team did was, they tried to prepare the audience for the fact that he was going to struggle verbally on some of the answers. They prepared going into it. I think he played his clip at the beginning, where he said he might mush words together. He might struggle with some of the answers. That having said, I mean, I think, no matter where you come down politically, it was a very hard night for John Fetterman in terms of where he was at with his stroke recovery and trying to deal with a format like this. A lot of people pointed out the format of the debate last night, which was really built around very short answers and meant to have a kind of a rapid fire give and take, was probably the worst possible format for him. I mean, he struggled with it. He clearly struggled with some of his answers. And, again, it's really kind of falls on the electorate to some point of how do you view that. I mean, most doctors say, Fetterman has shown that he is recovering from this stroke. He's at a stage of his recovery where he's not 100% recovered, but it's mainly, auditory processing issues. And the question is, whether, as far as that part of it is concerned, whether voters are going to, look at his heart problem or what's in Fetterman's heart, right? What his positions are on the issues and what he would do as a senator in terms of how he'd vote on things like reproductive rights or the minimum wage.
Now, reproductive rights is a really interesting issue. We just played those clips, but for Dr. Mehmet Oz to say he doesn't want the feds involved with this decision, as if he was saying it should be a woman's personal decision. He did say it should be a decision between a woman, her doctor, and local political leaders.
I guaranteeing you that it's a false flag operation yet. Don't know. But it would be a serious, serious mistake.
The White House said Tuesday they have no evidence Russia is preparing to use such weapons. Meanwhile, Ukraine's nuclear energy operator said Russian forces occupying the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant could be, quote, preparing a terrorist act using nuclear materials and radioactive waste stored, unquote. The Congressional Progressive Caucus has withdrawn a letter to the White House just one day after sending it, which urged the Biden administration to pursue direct negotiations with Russia for a ceasefire in Ukraine. The letter, signed by 30 liberal lawmakers, sparked a swift backlash among a number of Democrats for undermining support for Ukraine and for fracturing the Democratic response to the war ahead of November's midterms, as some Republicans are calling into question how much the U.S. should be sending to Ukraine. Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal said in a statement Tuesday, quote, "The letter was drafted several months ago, but unfortunately was released by staff without vetting. The letter has been conflated with GOP opposition to support for the Ukrainians' just defense of their national sovereignty. As such, it is a distraction at this time," she said. A Russian court Tuesday rejected an appeal by WNBA basketball star Brittany Griner, upholding her 9-year sentence on drug smuggling charges. Griner was arrested in February when airport customs officials found a small amount of cannabis oil in her luggage. The ruling increases pressure on the Biden administration to free Griner through negotiations. According to CNN, Griner's attorneys say a prisoner exchange is likely her best option. In Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz faced off Tuesday in their only debate in the race for U.S. Senate. The men sparred over abortion, the economy, and fracking. Fetterman also addressed his health as he recovers from a stroke last May. During a heated exchange over reproductive rights, Republican candidate Dr. Mehmet